Hey, PerfBytes listeners, before you get started on today's episode, we'd like to mention the generous support of our sponsor, Flood.io. Imagine your load test plan runs great with just 10 threads, but now you need 100,000 users. Distributed load testing seems like a good idea, right? But now you're wrestling with out-of-memory errors and blocked RMI ports, and your load generators outnumber the target servers for JMeter. You are throwing knives in the dark with limited feedback and Mandralic reporting. Say hello to Flood.io. Launch Flood test using JMeter or Gatling, view and share test results in real time, scale out your own grid across the globe in minutes. Flood.io, distributed load testing for everyone.
It's time for PerfBytes.
What the is PerfBytes?
The fourth square meal of the day.
Don't book like PerfBytes.
Waffles.
Microwave ready.
Blobbity blah. Blobbity blah.
Add nutritional value to your brain.
It's time for PerfBytes with your hosts Mark Tomlinson and James Pulley. PerfBytes. Whatever.
PerfBytes, whatever. Hello, everybody. Hello to the PerfBytean listeners out there. It's a time again for PerfBytes with your fantastic, taller than most other hosts, Mark Tomlinson, and my good friend James Pulley. James, how you doing?
I'm doing well, Mark. I finally kicked the cold, and you're absolutely right. If you've seen a lot of radio show hosts, they're really short.
There are a lot of short radio hosts. I don't know, and I'm an average kind of guy, 5'11" kind of thing. But you're what, sporting what, 6'3", 6'4"?
I'm 6 something.
6 something. God, he's a James giant guy. He needs a special swing arm for his microphone. That's not a euphemism, folks. What are you drinking, James?
Mark, yeah, it's been a while since we did a beverage review.
That's true.
I am drinking a whiskey from Oregon called Monkey Puzzle.
Monkey Puzzle, and what is this? Is it more like a bourbon whiskey?
It is more like it's whiskey with hops and honey added.
Oh, that's bizarre. In celebration of all of the tropical vacations I've had recently in January of 2014, I was just in Florida with my in-laws, and before that, of course, in Mexico. So I'm having a rum punch, a fruity rum punch with a mix of, orange and pineapple juice and coconut and different things and mango, and then, of course, 3 different kinds of rum. And so it's very rummy. It's very, very rum. Speaking of 3 kinds of rum, today's topic is Performance Centers of Excellence, actually, which is a topic that I can't believe in the last year or so of episodes, 36 some episodes, we haven't actually really done even the precursory introduction to Performance Center of Excellence. So it's actually a more recent term, I think, James. It's just not something that I couldn't find a lot of references to this idea of a center of excellence that goes back more than the last 15, 20 years.
So when you think about it, Mark, we've been concentrating mostly on mechanical skills and process skills up until this point.
True.
And now we're taking a little bit of a switch to an organizational method for making your organization more efficient. And you're right about the term centers of excellence. Let's be blunt. It comes out of the marketing foo-foo machine of Mercury Interactive a number of years ago. But in doing so, they did recognize a couple of items. It's a bringing together of people, process, tools, and methods being the external interfaces to the rest of the organization. Of course, the only problem with the major tool vendors, all of them, is they look at it as a tool sale with minimization of the talent.
Yeah, actually, I mean, there's probably the number. If you're going to do an ROI calculation and you're looking at cost, centralizing software licensing, just being able to share your licenses. Well, when everyone's feeling flush and gotten plenty of money, then everyone gets their own seat of the testing tool, right? There's tons of these licenses to go around, and then when the economy kind of falters, then your testing tool vendor comes and says, well, let's create a centers of excellence. And, what we'd like to focus on the show today is sort of, what are the things outside of just the tool and sharing licenses and stuff that are actually beneficial to having a performance center of excellence, which begs the question, James. I mean, there are other types of performance centers of excellence or centers of excellence. There's some functional testing, and I know there's a security centers of excellence. When I was at Microsoft, one was just getting started, and it was like it could be people all over the place that we're connected, right? So
yeah, but in general, it's this concentration or this bringing together of people, process, tools, and methods. And notice tools is only 1/4 of this. And where you have an expression in common of across all of the members of the organization to address a wide variety of technical needs. And those technical needs could be to internal stakeholders, external stakeholders. And the real benefit to the organization is, with this commonality in skills, is that people know how to plan to work with performance. They have common inputs, they have common outputs, they have common reporting, they have a plannable model for how long it takes. So instead of project managers dealing with, Bob the builder on Project Goofball and Dan the tool expert on Project Jupiter and Illusiwall on Project Mars Colony, you're now dealing with a process person, you're dealing with a business level peer that is your interface to the center of excellence that's going to provide information to you appropriate to your need.
And also it provides you a more consistent way to budget and manage the resources, which means people and talent, that it takes to even get performance testing done. And with the assumption, James, that I think if you look across any organization, there's always a very small group of people that actually know how to do performance really, really well. And everyone else thinks they know how to do it well, but they could certainly use some help in getting over that learning curve the first time they get into jumping and doing a test. So,
and sadly, if you're outside of a center of excellence model, most of the time, the performance testing is done as a part of some other operation. Oh, we have manual testers. We'll ask them to do it. We'll ask the security people. We'll ask the developers to do it.
Yeah.
So there's commonality in practice and skills, expected outputs, expected inputs, how long it takes to do. It's all over the map, and it becomes a real burden to the organization. But the cost of this are actually hidden because it's in all dozens of little projects.
Right. I think the most common forms that I see a center of excellence fall into, and they're not mutually exclusive, right? So the first thing I think we discuss about is this, what I would call a logical center of excellence. There's no real center. It's just a collection of sort of expertise and people. It's maybe a team that is sort of the guiding group of the experts. And I was actually on a webinar recently from SOSTA talking about continuous performance testing and such. And our good friend Brad Johnson talked about, performance is always that specialized elite group left at the end of the process that you kind of throw it over the wall, and they're supposed to make it perform and scale, and the odds are against them doing that in any fashionable 2-week time frame. And so you're inevitably going to be sending performance bugs into production. His thought of the center of excellence is that same elite group of people should actually be functioning and being drawn out logically from a logical center of excellence anywhere across the life cycle. We're talking to PMs, talking to business owners, talking to ops guys and developers and other even functional testers who can maybe learn to do some performance analysis. So the COE can operate first and foremost logically as that group of talented, expert, elite kind of people, but they're not elite anymore. They're ingrained across the organization.
And not only that, but any new project has a go-to location to get that expertise, and they know what to expect.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the second form of a center of excellence that I see most often is then people that once they get that group of performance people really together, the question inevitably comes up when you're going to take performance measurements is, do you have a lab?
I have this small lab called Amazon.
Yeah, you have a small lab called Amazon. So the other form of a center of excellence is the physical nature of a center of excellence, or the lab, or a space where you'll be able to sequester yourself for 3 days straight doing nothing but tuning, or submerge oneself in the excellence of your awesome performance people. So there's think of it as logically and physically you can actually create what is a physical center of excellence where all of this work can get done. That brings us to the next question is like, now we kind of get this idea of what a performance center of excellence is. But honestly, James, why should they care? And why should they send this to their manager and say, this is why we should build a performance center of excellence?
Well, thinking about it in a little bit of a humorous way, it's like going to the accounting department when you want to count money. You want to go to an expert for your performance. You would never go to the janitor's break room to, count money unless you are throwing dice or something like that.
Yeah, they have a fantasy football team or something like that.
No, exactly, but you never count your money at the table.
Right.
That's the rule.
Yeah.
I mean, you really want that specialization because there's efficiency that comes from specialization. And the better part of specialization is that you're able to recognize patterns that occur across an organization. Developers wind up hopping from project to project, and performance bad practices or good practices follow developers.
That's true. So if you have one team that's gone through, let's say, a high pressure performance application functionality or an app release that has high goals for scalability, that dev team is now pretty savvy about performance. So if you have another project and another project, you're going to want to reuse that team, of course, and sort of snowball your way around the organization.
Or you want to take the members and cross-pollinate them out to the rest of the dev teams to improve their performance too.
Yeah, so to that respect, I think from our perspective is that you have the ability to bring the whole organization up a level in terms of performance practices and capability. But obviously one of the most obvious reasons is just this. It goes back to the tool, the sharing of licenses. We know some of the tools out there are really, really expensive. And even if they're not expensive commercial tools, you have to do a lot of building to wrap a bunch of stuff. Let's say you're wrapping JMeter and you're going to spend a lot of money getting all this automation wrapped.
Yeah. There's a labor quotient there, and the more efficient your labor, the lower that labor piece.
Yeah, so you're reusing the tools, especially if it's a physical center of excellence. I mean, you can have that lab up and humming, flip the environment around on a Tuesday, get some testing done, flip it around, a different group on Wednesday. So you can get really, really mature, advanced kind of stuff. And of course, just the tool consolidation from having, 200 installs of load runner controllers everywhere. The tool ROI alone might be enough for you to consider this mode. But that's where James and I would caution you. It is about specialized talent and expertise. You may centralize them for management, but the real goal is to get that expertise out of the lab and spread all the way across the organization.
Yeah, you want those efficiency improvements that come from specialization. That being able to identify the performance anti-patterns instead of being pulled back into development or back into manual testing or back into security testing or back into, washing the boss's car or getting the boss's laundry or whatever. You want them staying on task, because the more time they are on task, the better they get at that core job, and the faster you're able to get your answers.
Yes, in the laundry center of excellence.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, and I specialize in the permanent press drying cycles.
For me, it's removal of Italian food stains.
No, I actually need that. I think I have some on my shirt right now. To me, the testing expertise angle that we're going down, James, obviously you and I are dedicated in PerfBytes to doing lots of knowledge transfer and mentoring and a center of excellence. If you have a functional tester, an automation tester who says, I'd really like to learn performance, well, you get them hooked up to the COE and they can start mentoring. And even if they're a dev who wants to learn more about performance, they can start taking on projects and cross-pollinating. Getting people over the learning curve is the other way that an IT organization can leverage a center of excellence, saying, you know what, if we invest in this central pool of specialized talent, the real purpose is that the 40 other project teams we have, they're going to have less of a learning curve, and I can get them to move faster on these other initiatives because the COE has already figured out all of the other different components. So let's talk a little, James, about how you would get started. Like, how do you organize and get started to build a COE and use it in that way from the central team to sort of impact across the org?
Well, the first thing you do is you bring together the talent. These are, throughout the organization, you've got, like I said, Bob the Builder earlier, Illusiwall, bring them together. That each of them have a germ of some sort of practice that they're growing, and you want some commonality. They're going to learn off of each other. They're going to cross-pollinate. You can share that information on Wiki or a SharePoint. You may not have to physically co-locate them, although that does quite often happen. But you definitely want to bring them together logically so that they can grow together as a team, and everyone external to this group knows how to interface with them on a common basis, both upfront at the beginning of the project, when you come time to performance test or other performance engineering activities, when they're testing, what's going to come out, and at the end, what type of reporting.
Yeah, I think it's also really important for this team not to be insular, right? It's not isolated, as Brad pointed out. It's not an elite touch. I mean, if you're using SharePoint, I mean, or a wiki of some sort, use chat functions. If you have IRC at your company, I mean, just open up an IRC channel just for perf testing, so anyone can hop on there and start asking questions and figure out how to do stuff. My current customer, I mean, every project for the COE goes through a Jira, use a ticketing system, so you can see the requests come through a pipeline. You know, even if the people aren't physically in the same center or located in the same place, at least you have sort of one place for them to operate and be identified as a team. So you've got your policies, you've got a contact list, processes and methodologies. Obviously, you've got some templates. You maybe, a questionnaire is usually really common when you're scoping out tests. Also, different tools and guides on how to use the tools. Like when would you use, a little sniffer tool versus when you use something to test DNS infrastructure, or when would you use a certain protocol in load runner or something like that. And of course, who's the point person on those different tools and different types of testing. So if you've got one performance tester that's really great with storage and Oracle databases, you got another performance engineer that's great with web technologies, you've got a sort of a contact list and point person, and that wiki or that SharePoint page becomes kind of the center of getting things together. And ultimately, what you're looking at is quite a matrix org structure within the performance COE itself, and you've got somebody leading that team, the head of the COE, the lead, who has both business acumen, also the technical acumen, because, it's a technical job to begin with. You and I would never send a total tech newbie to put in charge of a performance COE. They got to know how to...
Well, maybe once.
That was a bad choice, James. We had to fire that guy. But also, you're going to employ this process. This lead is going to sort of facilitate all of the politics and everything with the other project teams across the company, right? How does that lead sort of make sure the COE doesn't drift off into its isolated little island?
Well, it really comes down to standardized processes across the COE. They can be documented in Wiki or SharePoint, particularly if you're very decoupled in terms of around the country or something of that nature. But you want to have that consistent interface with the team, and you want to have that backed up by that lead, that person who can be the master politician or dart catcher if needed.
Yes.
Or dart thrower, in fact.
Could be.
Who's going to say, hey, I got your back, as long as we're using the standardized processes and methods. If someone tries to violate them, I'm the manager who's going to remove the barrier or discipline this other organization who's operating on a little bit of a rogue basis. Yeah. And that's critically important. Mark, to your point about not operating in isolation, not building an ivory tower and sitting up on top and waiting for the orc army to be built. You want to shift left. You want to invade the developer space. You want to talk to the project managers in their own native setting in their meetings, hopefully with their same language. Buy them pizza, buy them beer. And no one's above food bribery in this sense. Build the relationships and let them know you're a resource for them. And you're trying to make them more successful.
Yeah, and don't be that elite group of isolated performance geeks at the end of the process. Show up early and consider yourself a facilitator. Even if somebody else runs the tool or somebody else writes the script, see yourself as you're part of the center of excellence that's going to help them get it right. And maybe they need you'll give some oversight, or you'll give some pointers, and help that happen. As the lead again, though, James, the COEs sometimes garner, they can get rather large. I've seen people with 40, 50, almost 100 people in a performance COE for a very large company. And they have everyone from, just, people that are cranking out scripts to people that are doing
documentation specialists, project managers.
And that's a lot of money. So to be honest, some of those ones, so we talk about Pitar at his company. I mean, he's running a COE. I think of a couple others off the top of my head, where you've got all sorts of chargebacks and things to manage as well. So you can think of it as running a little business, inside IT. And if you get too caught up in that paradigm, and then you will end up sort of competing for budget and things like that in the IT world, and you spend more time running a business of the COE than actually still being about performance. And so that, to me, that can really destroy this discipline. It can really kind of rip it apart, because you're not just centralizing the expertise and then influencing the whole organization, and the value comes from that work versus running the COE as its own line of business. But sometimes you get to do that.
There are some checks and balances against this, Mark. One of them is always offering early performance engineering practices and environments, for small scale performance tests. An example I'm working on right now, there's a customer that has a project that's coming up, and we're going to be looking at the user stories to make sure that they're buttoned up from a performance perspective. There's SLAs on every request, that there's volume information present. And we're also going to be advising them on the monitoring of this, both in test and production. So even as the developers are engaging in, say, unit-based testing, they can have commonality in what they're monitoring with performance test and also in production. So these early pieces can keep you grounded on what your actual mission is. But to your point, Mark, about if you do wind up building the lab looks like a cost center. It does. It looks like a business. It's a utility.
Yeah, and I think a lot of folks just see it as the tool licenses and the facility license cost, and that's how they run their budget, versus actually seeing the Center of Excellence as actually charging consulting services back into the line of business. Like, I'm going to help your 15 developers and functional testers get their, like you're doing, James. You should almost be charging per hour for someone to come upstream and actually work in the dev group to help them improve what they're doing for performance. And I think a lot of COEs, we don't do that. We only charge for the work when it comes in, and we do it in our environment on an island, versus, we've got an internal chargeback rate just for hours of the guys from the COE team who will just come join you for maybe a whole project. Let's say, let's get one of those guys from the COE team to join for the entire 9 months of our dev effort this year. And, this would be great because this is really important performance.
Yeah, and we'll charge, 2 hours a day for 9 months for, what we're working on.
Yeah, exactly. Help us get the stories right. Help us get the scripting right. Help us do some trending in each sprint. I mean, that's worth it. That's mentoring. That's consulting. So we'll take a little break right now, James, for a word from our sponsor.
Hosting for PerfBytes.com has been provided by NewCo, New Centers of Excellence in Performance Engineering, PowerTest Professional Services, The Script Farm, LoadRunner by the Hour, Videratech, Cloud Architect, and No Load Test. For more information, go to www.newcoe.com or call 703-856-8187.
Okay, so we're going to wrap up our discussion on the Centers of Excellence. This has actually been really interesting, a couple new ideas here. We're going to talk a little bit about resource partners, and these are vendors or folks who are in the business of really helping you get your performance center of excellence off the ground. Now, we'll just say as a caveat, James, there are kind of the big consulting firms out there, the Accentures, IBMs, and a lot of them actually have the HP software. Obviously, HP's professional services or enterprise services themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They'll help you go implement a large HP-based performance center of excellence, and those are really, really huge enterprise class implementations, and it's usually all about the tool. And the one thing we'll say here is that when it comes to considering your partner in implementing a COE, remember that key word, specialization.
And also remember that tool is a fourth of the challenge.
It's only 25% of the bigger picture. And we, James, in our discussion right now, we're just expanding what it looks like to run a COE. But if you go to one of these big vendors, 9 times out of 10, they think about the tool first and they think about the talent last. Sad to say, but some of those, I hate to call them body shops, but they really do throw a large number of head count at this thing. But it's not so great for you as a customer if those guys aren't the best talented performance engineers on the planet. So we would recommend a little bit is to think about outsourcing more with I'd say a more intimate partner. So if you outsource completely, some of these big vendors, they're generic, right? They're really generic. They're not specialized. They're probably not.
Mark, this is like buzzword bingo.
It is buzzword.
It's kind of like you can sit in a meeting and you've got an outsourcing vendor come in. And if they see Center of Excellence, someone in the meeting should jump up and say bingo.
Bingo, exactly. So, well, we'll help you install a Center of Excellence.
Bingo.
And then just start drilling them on it. What kind of Center of Excellence? What's your vision for that? How's the strategy work? Talk to me about the talent. The tools, there aren't that many. So HP Performance Center is probably the only one that is really COE ready. But it's not about the tool. So I think there's a couple other pieces of advice. One, as with any partner or vendor, check your references and also be specific about what you're asking of them. Do they know how to operate strategically on the subject of performance across all the roles in your organization? Can they talk to ops about performance? Can they talk to development, PMs, the business? Do they have the ability and credibility to do that work across the org?
This absolutely is a specialized discipline. Even if you were to go to the very, very large vendors, there are only a few that actually have any merit, unfortunately. From the big vendor standpoint, you're looking at a Capgemini and only then on the subset of Sogeti. You're not looking at the Accentures. You're not looking at some of the other very, very large partners who are really more interested in selling you a tool and then running your whole business. Yep. Taking it as an outsource, and the more bodies they can throw at it, the better.
Yeah, exactly.
The big impact of a Center of Excellence is there is a organic, measurable impact to all of the other parts of your organization, all the non-performance, non-testers at the company, devs, admins, project managers. They're all customers. They're all stakeholders in a sense, and they should know your vision, your strategy, how to interface with you, what they get from you, what its value is. And if you don't have all those 5 criteria met, essentially you're failing as a Center of Excellence and how you're able to impact positively your organization. And Mark, other than Sogeti, who I've already mentioned, there are a number of other organizations that have a very strong track record.
Yeah, I want to say that, when you look at people like James and I, we've been in so many different organizations doing tests at small project levels, very small project levels. I mean, even like a project that's a couple of days or less than a week, or something that, goes on for months or years to stand up a full-on COE. And, there are a lot of commonalities. When the bigger you get, they tend to look the same just because it's an order of scale. But my best advice is if you really are just kind of looking to do a checkbox on performance and kind of do what everyone else does, and it's not really critical to your business, think about the big vendors and know that they're going to do kind of the run-of-the-mill stuff that everyone else gets. They're going to use the same tools. It's going to cost about the same. And, you and I, James, I don't think we never hear any real wow stories from customers that have gone down that route. I mean, it just kind of looks the same, as big as whatever. Everyone's got one. Have a nice day. But if you're looking for a differentiator, and performance I see as a niche talent as a differentiator, and it's important to your business. Like if you're going to take out Super Bowl ads next year, and then you better think about having projects that have special performance skill. So then you would look at Northway, our good buddy Scott Moore, I think Odyssey's got a good track record. I know a handful of the guys at Odyssey under Bill have built some great COEs and put together the processes, and they're an HP partner as well. Sugeti guys are at Capgemini, of course. And then I think there's also some tremendous research done in years past by different analysts, particularly our friend Teresa Lanowitz, who's at VokeInc.com. She's got some white papers and some studies on COEs and the ROI models for COEs that kind of go along this same experience.
And let's not forget our overseas friends, such as Stuart Moncrief.
Yeah, Stuart works for JDS still, and with Mikhail Pogrebitsky. So JDS actually is an HP partner in Australia. There's a couple others. I want to say RevIT, but I think they got bought. I don't know if they still do that, but they maybe got bigger. And of course, some of the big vendors are down in Australia as well. But like a specialty vendor like Stuart, I mean, he can really advise you on the tool implementation, the strategy, the types of tests that need to be done. And that's what you're really looking for. Again, think of it talent first and tool second, and then sort of grow that expertise across the organization. I think that's the best advice we have on centers of excellence. Well, James... PerfBytes listeners, once again, you've come to the close of yet another deeply emotional episode of PerfBytes. And as always, we thank each of you sincerely for taking the time to listen to the show today.
Mom, thank you for tuning in, and I'll be down to pick up the lasagna and the new microphone a little bit later this week.
Okay. How she has good lasagna? I think you've told me.
Yeah.
I think maybe shout out to James's mom's lasagna. Maybe we have that for 4th of July. I, of course, will give my shout-out thanks to the sexy Irish voice of PerfBytes, who was hanging on the beach with me in Sanibel watching dolphins and drinking rum punch, which was pretty awesome. And, of course, special thanks to our great sponsor, Flood.io, for their sponsorship and continued support of the PerfBytes episode. Thank you, Tim.
And in an irritation to science fiction fans everywhere, today's episode is powered by both the Daleks and the Borg. You will either be assimilated or exterminated.
One of the two. I can't choose, really. Who can decide? And, of course, remember that all the content of the PerfBytes episode is protected by Bill Nye, who was last seen riding a dinosaur at the Creation Museum in Petersburg, Kentucky, after calling it a draw in his debate with Ken Ham over which came first, science or Ken Ham.
So Mark, was that Ken Ham or canned ham?
Yeah, I don't know the difference there either.
Okay. For more information about PerfBytes, please visit the show's website at www.perfbytes.com or follow us on the Twitter and the Facebook. And of course, you can always subscribe and listen to the PerfBytes podcast on iTunes. Just search for PerfBytes in the iTunes store and click subscribe.
As, of course, the PerfBytes show, you should know, and the staff here are supporters of the Practical Performance Analyst, the Performance Engineering Book of Knowledge, the Computer Measurement Group, the Workshop on Performance and Reliability, and, of course, the Software Test Professionals community of software testers. We hope to see you at the next STPCon conference in April. We will be there in New Orleans. We'll see you there. And that, right?
And PerfBytes is copyright 2014, all rights reserved, all wrongs avenged.
Don't forget to tune in to the other broadcast of the News of the Damned, which you'll find on the same RSS feed, right?
Exactly.
Vincent Price welcomes you. Thanks, everyone, and catch you on the next episode of PerfBytes.
Bye, everyone.